March 23, 1945, 02:47 hours, and deep beneath the ruins of Wesel, Germany, British signals intelligence officers are staring at a catastrophe unfolding in real time. The Rhine crossing, Operation Plunder, is 12 hours away, and 40,000 Wehrmacht's troops are converging on the exact sectors where Montgomery's forces plan to cross. You can smell the damp concrete and stale cigarette smoke in that underground bunker as intercepted German transmissions paint a picture that shouldn't exist. The largest river assault since D-Day is about to become a slaughter. The numbers are devastating. LXVI Corps, 2 full panzer divisions, 3 infantry divisions, all moving through the darkness toward crossing points that are supposed to be secret. In 6 hours, British and American paratroopers will drop directly into prepared German positions. The Rhine, Hitler's last natural barrier protecting the Reich, is about to become an Allied graveyard. Before I tell you how one British radio man with chameleon fingers redirected an entire German corps using nothing but stolen equipment and perfect mimicry, comment below where you're watching from and subscribe to the channel. Trust me, you won't want to miss how this signals sergeant pulled off what German intelligence later called der Weselgeist, the ghost of Wesel. Spring 1945, and the Wehrmacht's communication network is a fascinating hybrid of cutting-edge technology and fatal vulnerability. At the strategic level, German forces rely on the famous Enigma machines, those mechanical marvels that British codebreakers at Bletchley Park had been reading for years. But tactical communications, the minute-by-minute movement orders that actually direct troops in the field, those depend on something far more basic: Morse code transmissions using Hellschreiber systems and manual telegraph keys. Here's the critical weakness nobody talks about. While Enigma grabbed all the headlines, the real backbone of German field communications was human operators tapping out dots and dashes on telegraph keys. By March 1945, British Y-service intercept stations scattered across liberated Europe are pulling in over 3,000 German tactical messages every single day. They're reading enemy mail faster than German commanders themselves. But reading messages is one thing. Sending fake ones? That's supposed to be impossible. See, every Morse operator develops what signals intelligence calls a fist, a unique rhythm pattern as distinctive as a fingerprint. The way you tap out dots and dashes, your spacing between letters, the tiny hesitations between words, even how you hold down the key for a dash versus a dot, it all creates a signature. German signals operators are trained from day one to recognize these patterns. They know their regular correspondence like you'd recognize your mother's voice on the phone. Studies conducted by British intelligence show that experienced German interceptors can identify individual Allied operators with 89% accuracy. They can literally hear the difference between a British operator in London versus one in Cairo just from the rhythm of their Morse. The Allies had tried radio deception before. Operation Fortitude, that massive deception before D-Day, worked brilliantly at the strategic level, convincing Hitler the invasion would come at Calais. But tactical deception? Different story entirely. Every time Allied operators tried to impersonate German transmissions, enemy signals units spotted them within minutes. The fakes were too perfect, too textbook. Real operators make consistent personal mistakes, have quirks, get tired, speed up when excited. By early 1945, German signals doctrine specifically trains operators to detect false transmissions. They maintain logs of known operator patterns. When suspicious transmissions come through, they have verification protocols, secondary channels, callback procedures, authentication codes changed daily. The manual literally states, any deviation in sending pattern, no matter how slight, must be treated as potential enemy action. The Y-service stations know all this. They've been monitoring German communications for 5 years. They have rooms full of intercepted messages, libraries of recorded transmissions, detailed personality profiles of hundreds of German operators. They know that Feldwebel Müller in the 116th Panzer Division always sends Achtung with an extended first dash. They know that operators from Bavaria abbreviate differently than those from Prussia. But knowledge isn't capability. The British have the best intercept service in the world, but they can't send. It's like being fluent in a language but unable to speak it with the right accent. Every attempt at tactical deception has failed because German operators spot the imposters immediately. That's the situation on March 22, 1945. Operation Plunder launches at dawn on the 24th. 24 hours to cross the Rhine, and German intelligence has somehow identified the crossing points. Maybe through aerial reconnaissance, maybe a captured document, maybe pure deduction. Doesn't matter. LXVI Corps is moving into position. Montgomery's 21st Army Group consists of over 1 million men. The American 9th Army under Simpson, British 2nd Army under Dempsey, Canadian 1st Army under Carrere. They have 5,500 artillery pieces lined up along the western bank of the Rhine. They have specialized amphibious vehicles, Buffalo LVTs, DD Sherman tanks that can swim. They have smoke generators to obscure the crossing, searchlights to create artificial moonlight, everything except surprise. The Rhine at Wesel is 400 meters wide, flowing at 8 kilometers per hour. The eastern bank is higher than the western, giving German defenders perfect fields of fire. Wehrmacht artillery has pre-registered every possible crossing point. They've had months to prepare. Concrete bunkers, minefields, barbed wire entanglements that extend into the river itself. Even with overwhelming superiority, the Allies estimate 22,000 casualties if the Germans are waiting. Intelligence officers in that bunker under Wesel are doing the math. LXX 6th Corps includes the 116th Panzer Division, veteran Eastern Front survivors with 89 operational tanks. The 100 Infantry Division, the 190th Infantry Division, elements of the 7th Parachute Division. If they're in position when the assault begins, if they're ready and waiting, the Rhine runs red. Enter Sergeant Thomas Adrian Flowers. And no, not the Tommy Flowers who invented Colossus at Bletchley Park. Different man, same uncommon genius. This Tommy Flowers is 31 years old, born in Whitechapel, son of a bricklayer. Before the war, he worked nights at the Dollis Hill Post Office, repairing telephone exchange equipment. But his real passion was radio. Flowers had been a ham radio enthusiast since age 14. Not just talking to other operators, studying them. He'd sit for hours with headphones on, listening to German commercial radio operators, memorizing their patterns. He kept notebooks filled with timing measurements, charts of operator habits. His friends thought he was obsessed. His wife called it Tommy's peculiar hobby. When war broke out, Flowers enlisted immediately. His personnel file from 1940 makes interesting reading. Exceptional linguistic ability, fluent in German, including military terminology and regional dialects. Demonstrated ability to replicate Morse patterns of observed operators. Recommended for signals intelligence. There's also a note. Tendency toward unauthorized initiative requires close supervision. That last bit comes from 2 incidents. December 1943, Flowers intercepts a German transmission ordering a supply convoy to a specific map reference. On his own initiative, without authorization, he transmits a correction in perfect imitation of the German operator, redirecting the convoy 20 kilometers into British lines. The convoy, 12 trucks loaded with winter uniforms and ammunition, drives straight into captivity. His commanding officer is furious. You don't just transmit on German frequencies. That's not how intelligence works. You listen, you decode, you analyze, you don't talk back. Flowers gets an official reprimand. 6 months later, he does it again. June 1944, right after D-Day. A lost German panzer company is requesting directions. Flowers can't resist. He answers in flawless imitation of their division signals officer, sends them on a 12-hour wild goose chase through the Normandy countryside. By the time they realize something's wrong, they're surrounded by Canadian infantry. Another reprimand. His skills are undeniable, but the brass doesn't know what to do with him. He's too valuable to discharge, too unpredictable to promote.
So he sits in a signals intercept station, listening to German traffic, forbidden from transmitting. But Flowers hasn't been idle. He's been studying one operator in particular, Unteroffizier Klaus Steinberg, primary radio operator for LXX 6th Corps headquarters. For 8 months, Flowers has been Steinberg's shadow. He knows that Steinberg is 23 years old, from Munich, drafted in 1942. More importantly, he knows Steinberg's fist. Flowers has recorded 847 of Steinberg's transmissions. He's analyzed them with scientific precision. Steinberg's dots average 0.11 seconds. His dashes run 0.34 seconds, slightly longer than standard. The spacing between his dots and dashes within a letter, 0.09 seconds. Between letters, 0.31 seconds. Between words, 0.73 seconds. But it's more than just timing. Steinberg has habits, quirks that make him unique. When he sends the number 5, d-d-d-d-da, he holds that final dash just a fraction longer, 0.37 seconds instead of 0.34. When sending grid coordinates, he has a distinctive rhythm. Fast for the letters, slight pause, slower for the numbers. He abbreviates Verstanden, understood, as VSDN, but spells out Achtung, attention, in full. Regional quirks too. Steinberg's from Bavaria, and it shows. He uses Servus as a sign-off in informal transmissions, technically against regulations but common among southern German operators. He sends umlauts using the old commercial radio convention rather than military standard. When tired, and by March 1945 he's always tired, his sending speed drops from 22 words per minute to 19, but his character spacing remains constant. Flowers has notebooks filled with Steinberg's patterns, pages of transcribed messages with timing notations in the margins. He's practiced Steinberg's fist so many times he can send it without thinking.
His fingers have muscle memory of another man's rhythm. On the evening of March 22, 1945, Flowers is at his intercept station, headphones on, when Steinberg comes on the air. Routine traffic, supply requests, position reports. But Flowers notices something. Steinberg mentions he's going off duty at midnight, night shift taking over. And Flowers knows the night operator, Gefreite Hoffmann, competent but unimaginative, nowhere near as distinctive as Steinberg. An idea forms. Insane? Impossible? But an idea nonetheless. Flowers finds his superior, Captain James Morrison of the Intelligence Corps. "Sir, I can become Steinberg. I can redirect LXXV Corps away from the crossing points." Morrison stares at him. "Have you lost your mind, Sergeant?" Flowers lays out his plan. He'll wait until after midnight, after Steinberg goes off duty. Using captured German equipment, they have a warehouse full from destroyed Wehrmacht positions. He'll transmit new orders in perfect imitation of Steinberg's fist. Not fake unit reports or phantom armies like Fortitude, real orders to real units from their real headquarters. "It's impossible," Morrison says. "Even if you could perfectly imitate him, which you can't, German direction finding will triangulate your position in minutes. Not if I transmit from close enough to German lines that it seems plausible. Not if I keep transmissions short and move between them. And when the real Steinberg comes back on duty? He won't, not until 800 tomorrow. By then, the crossing will be underway." Morrison takes this up the chain. The response is predictable. Brigadier John Whiteley, 21st Army Group Intelligence, "The stupidest bloody idea since Gallipoli. We don't do cowboy operations." The Special Operations Executive Representative is even blunter. "Technically impossible and strategically suicidal. If Jerry catches on, they'll know we're up to something. They'll reinforce everywhere." Valid concerns all. German direction-finding equipment can triangulate a transmission to within 500 meters in less than 3 minutes. If Flowers makes any mistake, uses the wrong abbreviation, sends at the wrong speed, includes British terminology, the entire German signals network goes on alert. Worse, if Steinberg unexpectedly returns to duty, if he transmits simultaneously with Flowers, the game is up instantly. But the clock is ticking. Every hour brings more German units toward the crossing points. Colonel Richard Gambier Perry of MI6 Section 8 reviews the proposal. His verdict? Flowers' folly.
Absolutely not. We are not risking British equipment and Allied operations on one sergeant's ability to tap a telegraph key. The British say no. But the British aren't the only ones listening. Colonel Oscar Koch is Patton's intelligence chief, a man who understands both conventional and unconventional warfare. He's been in the bunker, watching the disaster unfold. He's seen deception operations fail before, usually because they're too complex, too clever. But this is different. You're not creating false intelligence, Koch tells Morrison. You're not inventing phantom divisions or imaginary attacks. You're hijacking their actual command network. One voice, trusted completely, giving real orders to real units. Koch has authority from Patton to take whatever measures necessary to ensure the Rhine crossing succeeds. At 23:15 on March 22, he signs the authorization. One condition: Flowers has 2 hours. If it doesn't work by 0200, they abort and prepare for a bloodbath at dawn. The equipment comes from a captured German signals depot, a 15 WSE transmitter, standard Wehrmacht issue, complete with spare tubes and the distinctive German telegraph key. The power source is more problematic. Can't use local electricity, too unreliable. They jury-rig batteries from 3 American trucks, enough for maybe 4 hours of transmission. Location is critical. Too far from German lines and direction finding reveals the deception. Too close and Flowers might be captured or killed by German patrols. They settle on a destroyed farmhouse 800 meters from German positions, just north of Wesel. Close enough to seem plausible, far enough to escape if necessary. At 23:30, Flowers and 2 commandos drive through the darkness in a jeep with muffled engine. The farmhouse is a skeleton, roof gone, 3 walls standing. They set up in what used to be the cellar, the transmitter on a wooden table, probably used for storing preserves. The antenna wire thrown over a broken beam, oriented toward German positions. 23:47 hours. Flowers puts on the headphones, places his fingers on the key. He's practiced this moment 1,000 times, but his hands are shaking. Not from fear, from anticipation. Like a musician about to perform a piece they've rehearsed to perfection. First transmission has to be routine, nothing suspicious. Weather report, standard format. He takes a breath, begins sending. Dit-da, da-dit-da. LXXV core signals, Steinberg reporting. Weather sector, visibility 2,000 meters, wind northwest, 15 kilometers, precipitation nil. The response comes immediately from 3 German stations. Routine acknowledgments.
They don't question it. Why would they? It's Steinberg. They recognize his fist like an old friend's voice. 0015 hours. Now for the real test. Flowers transmits LXXV Corps command to all units. Priority intelligence from Abwehr. Enemy deception confirmed Sector Weasel. Main assault developing Emmerich sector, 40 kilometers north. Artillery bombardment Weasel is diversion only. Repeat, Weasel is feint. Real crossing at Emmerich. All units redirect immediately. Acknowledge by division. The genius is in the details. Flowers deliberately transposes 2 letters in Emmerich, then corrects them, exactly as Steinberg had done in 6 previous transmissions when sending that town's name. He uses Steinberg's characteristic ach so instead of verstanden at the end. The rhythm, the spacing, the quirks, all perfect. Silence. 5 seconds. 10. Then the 180th Infantry Division acknowledges. 180th received. Redirecting to Emmerich. Request confirmation of sector boundaries. Flowers has prepared for this. He transmits grid coordinates using Steinberg's distinctive pattern. Fast letters, pause, slow numbers. More acknowledgments come in. The 116th Panzer Division at 0013, 116th Panzer confirmed. Redirecting toward Emmerich. Estimated arrival 060 hours. By 1:45, 7 divisions have acknowledged new orders. 40,000 men, hundreds of tanks, entire artillery regiments, all moving away from the real crossing points toward empty fields around Emmerich. But Flowers isn't done. The deception needs continuous reinforcement.
Every 20 minutes, he transmits updates. Enemy paratroop aircraft observed approaching Emmerich. Artillery registration detected sector Emmerich. Reconnaissance reports bridge construction materials massing opposite Emmerich. Each transmission is a masterpiece of impersonation. He varies his speed slightly as Steinberg would when tired. He includes the little Bavarian flourishes that make Steinberg unique. When the 84th Infantry Division requests clarification, he responds with mild irritation in his sending pattern. Slightly sharper dots, more emphatic dashes, exactly as Steinberg does when questioned. 2 o'clock hours, March 24. Dawn is 4 hours away. Operation Varsity, the airborne component, launches in 8 hours. Through his headphones, Flowers can hear the German radio net exploding with activity. Units requesting fuel for the unexpected movement. Traffic jams developing as divisions converge on roads leading to Emmerich. Commanders asking for confirmation of the intelligence source. Flowers provides it all, maintaining Steinberg's persona perfectly. To questions about intelligence source, direct from Abwehr Berlin, cannot discuss on this frequency. To complaints about fuel, requisition from local reserves. This is maximum priority. The 7th Parachute Division radios that they're having difficulty moving their anti-aircraft guns. Flowers responds with Steinberg's characteristic impatience. Leave heavy equipment, speed essential, light weapons only. 2:47 hours. Flowers sends what will be his most audacious transmission. Enemy paratroopers sighted approaching Emmerich. All available units respond maximum speed. This is not exercise. Repeat, not exercise. Enemy airborne assault imminent Emmerich. The German 84th Infantry Division's war diary, captured weeks later, records 3 o'clock. Racing toward Emmerich under emergency orders. Roads completely clogged with units responding to Corps' directive. No sign of enemy. Awaiting further instructions. The 116th Panzer Division, 3:30. Lead elements arriving Emmerich sector. No enemy contact. Deploying in defensive positions awaiting airborne assault. By 4 o'clock, the deception is complete. 40,000 German soldiers are spread across 20 kilometers of empty countryside around Emmerich, searching the skies for paratroopers who will never come. Their abandoned positions at Wesel stand nearly empty. A few second-line units, some Hitler Youth, scattered strongpoints that should have been backed by 2 panzer divisions. Flowers maintains the illusion until 5:30, then goes silent. By then, it doesn't matter. The German units are too far from Wesel to return in time. The last transmission in perfect Steinberg style. Stand by for further orders. Maintain positions. Servus. At 10 o'clock hours on March 24, 1945, the first wave of Allied paratroopers begins dropping over Wesel. Operation Varsity involves 16,000 airborne troops carried in 1,696 transport aircraft and 1,348 gliders. They expect to land in a hornet's nest of German defenders. Instead, they find scattered, confused resistance. Private James Neve, 6th Airborne Division, later recalled, "We came down expecting hell. Briefing said 2 panzer divisions waiting. Instead, found some old men and boys with rifles. Couldn't understand it." The German 7th Parachute Division, elite troops who should have been devastating the Allied landing zones, are 35 kilometers away at Emmerich, still scanning empty skies. Their commander, General Erdmann, radios repeatedly, "Where are the enemy paratroopers? Skies empty. Request confirmation of intelligence." By noon, Allied forces have secured all primary objectives. The Rhine bridgehead is established. German command structure is in chaos. Nobody can explain how entire divisions ended up at Emmerich. Radio logs show the orders came from Corps' headquarters, from Steinberg himself. The ground assault across the Rhine meets minimal resistance. Churchill himself crosses the Rhine on March 25, cigar in mouth, declaring, "The German is beat."
We've got him on the run. He doesn't know that 40,000 Germans who should have been shooting at him are still waiting at Emmerich for an attack that never comes. The German reaction, when it finally comes, is equal parts confusion and rage. Unteroffizier Klaus Steinberg, the real one, reports for duty at 08 on March 24 to find his unit in chaos. His superiors immediately suspect treason. Here are transmissions in his name, his distinctive fist, ordering massive troop movements. Steinberg is arrested, interrogated for 3 days. The poor man is completely bewildered. They show him transcripts of his transmissions from the night. He reads them in growing amazement. Later, in Allied captivity, he told intelligence officers, "Every detail was perfect. The timing, the abbreviations, even my habit of sending auch so instead of verstanden. It was more me than me, like reading my own diary written by someone else." General Alfred Schlemm, commanding the German 1st Parachute Army, conducts a furious investigation. His conclusion: "We received absolutely authentic orders from LXLVI Corps. Every verification protocol was correct. The transmission pattern was unmistakably Steinberg. Either he is a traitor, or the enemy has achieved something we thought impossible." Wehrmacht signals intelligence designates the incident Der Wesselgeist, the ghost of Wesel. Emergency reforms are implemented immediately. All movement orders now require voice confirmation over secure landlines. Radio operators are ordered to include random personal details in transmissions that only they would know. Trust in radio communications collapses overnight. But it's too late. The damage is done. LXLVI Corps eventually realizes the deception and races back toward Wesel, but by then Allied forces are across in strength. The Rhine barrier is broken. The road to Berlin is open. German intelligence reports from late March make fascinating reading. They can't accept that one operator fooled them so completely. There must have been a leak, a traitor, captured codebooks. The idea that a British sergeant simply learned to perfectly imitate their operator is too humiliating to consider. Some German officers suspect supernatural forces. How else to explain Steinberg being in 2 places at once? Others theorize about secret British technology, machines that can replicate human Morse patterns. Nobody guesses the truth. One man with exceptional ears and fingers who spent 8 months studying another man's rhythm. The impact spreads through the Wehrmacht like a virus. If Steinberg can be impersonated, who else? Operators begin adding personal codes to their transmissions. Units start verifying every order through multiple channels. Communication slows to a crawl. In the race across Germany in April 1945, Allied forces repeatedly outmaneuver German units simply because Wehrmacht command networks are paralyzed by suspicion. Hitler himself weighs in, ordering the execution of 12 signals officers suspected of collaboration. The order is never carried out. By then, the Reich is collapsing too fast for formal executions. But the paranoia remains. German radio operators no longer trust their own ears. The success at Wesel revolutionizes Allied signals intelligence. Within a week, a formal program is established, Operation Doppelganger. The concept is simple. Identify key enemy operators, study them intensively, then impersonate them at critical moments. The U.S. Army Signal Corps creates the Flowers Protocol, requiring analysis of at least 1,000 enemy transmissions before attempting impersonation. Training programs are established. Operators spend months learning to replicate specific enemy patterns. It's like method acting, but with telegraph keys instead of dialogue. British Y Service develops what they call the Fist Library, a vast collection of enemy operator patterns. By war's end, they have cataloged 3,400 different German operators. Each entry includes timing measurements, common abbreviations, regional quirks, even observations about mood patterns. Operator 247B sends 15% faster when unit is retreating. The technique spreads to other theaters. In the Pacific, American operators learn to imitate Japanese telegraph patterns. It's harder. Japanese Morse includes special characters for their language, but not impossible.
During the Okinawa campaign, false Japanese transmissions redirect several supply convoys into American ambushes. The Soviets, always quick to adopt successful tactics, develop their own version. During the Battle of Berlin, Soviet operators successfully impersonate Wehrmacht signals, creating phantom pockets of resistance that tie down German reserves. One Soviet operator, Sergeant Mikhail Volkov, becomes so proficient he can impersonate 17 different German operators. By the final weeks of the war, German tactical communications are in complete breakdown. Nobody trusts radio transmissions. Orders require triple verification. Response times that should be minutes stretch to hours. The Wehrmacht, once proud of its rapid command system, is reduced to motorcycle couriers and landline telephones. Post-war analysis is revealing. The Rhine crossing was expected to cost 22,000 Allied casualties. Actual casualties, 7,500. The difference? 40,000 Germans sitting at Emmerich instead of Wesel.
Military historians calculate that successful Rhine crossing shortened the war by 4 to 6 weeks, saving approximately 300,000 lives on all sides. General Eisenhower, in his memoir, writes, "The misdirection of German reserves at Wesel was worth 3 divisions. It saved approximately 15,000 Allied lives and demonstrated that modern warfare is as much about information as ammunition." The 40,000 German troops at Emmerich surrendered piecemeal over the following week. Most never fired a shot. They'd been neutralized as effectively as if bombed, without a single casualty. The 116th Panzer Division, veterans of Kursk and the Eastern Front, taken out of the war by fake dots and dashes. The technique Tommy Flowers pioneered, behavioral impersonation in communications, becomes a cornerstone of electronic warfare. It's not about breaking codes or intercepting messages. It's about becoming the enemy, speaking in their voice so perfectly they can't tell the difference. During the Korean War, U.S. Army signals units use computer-aided analysis to replicate Chinese Communist Morse patterns. The technology is primitive, rooms full of vacuum tubes, but it works. False Chinese transmissions redirect entire regiments during the Battle of Pork Chop Hill. Vietnam sees further refinement. The National Security Agency develops programs that can analyze and replicate North Vietnamese operator patterns in real time. American operators don't need to spend months studying one enemy operator. Computers do it for them, creating templates that can be activated instantly. The 1991 Gulf War represents the technique's modern evolution. Coalition forces don't just imitate Iraqi radio operators. They use digital voice synthesis to replicate specific Iraqi commanders' voices. Iraqi units receive orders from what sounds exactly like their colonel, telling them to abandon positions. Many do, contributing to the coalition's lightning victory. The principle remains unchanged from Flowers' innovation. Trust is a vulnerability in military communications. If you trust the voice on the other end, if you recognize the pattern, the rhythm, the personality, you'll follow orders without question. And that trust can be weaponized. Modern cyber warfare extends this concept into digital networks. When hackers talk about behavioral impersonation, they're using techniques that descend directly from Tommy Flowers listening to Klaus Steinberg's telegraph key. Instead of Morse patterns, it's typing rhythms, email styles, digital fingerprints. The medium changes, the principle endures. The Israeli Signals Intelligence Unit, Unit 8200, specifically credits the Weasel operation in their training materials. Every operator, human or digital, has a signature. Learn it well enough, and you become them. They've used similar techniques in operations that remain classified, but the lineage is clear. Current NATO doctrine includes sections on pattern spoofing that read like updates of Flowers' notebooks. Modern systems use AI to analyze millions of communication patterns, learning to replicate not just the technical aspects, but the human quirks that make communications authentic. Even in the age of encrypted satellite communications and quantum computing, the human element remains. Operators still have patterns. They still develop habits. They still trust familiar voices and rhythms. And that trust can still be exploited by someone patient enough to learn the patterns. What happened to the people who made this possible?
Tommy Flowers received the Military Cross for his actions at Weasel. The citation, necessarily vague due to classification, mentions only exceptional service in signals intelligence contributing to Rhine crossing success. The full story remained classified until 1975. After the war, Flowers returned to his job at the London Post Office. His colleagues knew him as a quiet man who repaired telephone exchanges and never talked about his war service. He married his sweetheart, raised 3 children, fixed phones. The man who had directed 40,000 enemy soldiers with his fingertips spent his remaining years ensuring London's telephone calls connected properly. In 1962, a German television documentary about the war interviewed Klaus Steinberg, by then a Munich businessman. Asked about the Weasel incident, Steinberg laughed. "I finally met the man who was me for one night. We corresponded for years after. He knew my sending pattern better than I did. He told me things about my own habits I never noticed." Flowers and Steinberg did indeed correspond, an unlikely friendship between impersonator and impersonated. Steinberg visited London in 1965. The 2 men spent an evening at a pub, fingers tapping Morse code on the table, laughing at jokes only they could understand. Flowers died in 1987, age 73. His obituary in the London Times mentioned his post office career and military cross, but nothing about Weasel. It wasn't until the 1990s, when military historians gained access to classified records, that his full contribution became known. Captain James Morrison, who first heard Flowers' crazy idea, rose to brigadier general. In a 1970 interview, he reflected, "We almost said no. Came that close to dismissing it as impossible."
Thank God for Oscar Koch and American pragmatism. Flowers saved more lives in one night than most soldiers do in entire wars. Colonel Oscar Koch, Patton's intelligence chief who authorized the operation, never forgot that night. His post-war lectures at the Army War College always included the Weasel story. Sometimes the best operations are the simplest. One man, one transmitter, perfect execution. No committees, no complex plans, just pure skill applied at the critical moment. Even the Germans came to appreciate the elegance of their deception. General Alfred Schlemm in his memoirs wrote, "We were not defeated by superior numbers or technology at Weasel. We were defeated by one British sergeant who understood that war is ultimately about human communication, and humans can be deceived if you speak their language perfectly enough." March 23, 1945, 02:47 hours. A moment when 40,000 German soldiers began moving away from the Rhine crossing points following orders that seemed completely authentic. They were authentic, in every way except origin. The voice they trusted, the pattern they recognized, the personality they knew, all perfect, all fake. You think about the ironies. The German Wehrmacht, masters of blitzkrieg, paralyzed by suspicion of their own communications. Steinberg, arrested for treason because someone impersonated him too perfectly. Flowers, reprimanded twice for unauthorized transmissions, saving 15,000 lives with unauthorized transmissions. The greatest irony? This decisive deception required no advanced technology, no computers, no complex encryption, no sophisticated equipment. Just one man who spent 8 months learning another man's rhythm. A few notebooks filled with timing measurements. Fingers trained to replicate patterns they'd never originally created. In our age of AI and quantum computing, of satellite communications and cyber warfare, Flowers' achievement seems almost quaint. Dots and dashes? Telegraph keys? Manual impersonation? But the principle he proved remains foundational to modern intelligence. Every communication system ultimately depends on trust, and trust properly analyzed can be replicated. Today, when NSA analysts use supercomputers to analyze digital signatures, when Israeli intelligence spoofs enemy communications, when cyber warriors impersonate users to penetrate networks, they're all following the path Tommy Flowers traced with pen and paper in 1944, studying Klaus Steinberg's fist. The farmhouse where Flowers transmitted that night no longer exists, bulldozed during post-war reconstruction. There's no monument at Weasel to the ghost who saved thousands of lives. But in signals intelligence schools from Fort Gordon to Cheltenham, from Tel Aviv to Moscow, they still teach the lesson of March 23, 1945. The lesson is simple. In war, the most powerful weapon isn't always a bomb or a bullet. Sometimes it's understanding the enemy so completely that you can become them. Sometimes victory belongs not to the strongest, but to the one who listens most carefully. Tommy Flowers returned to the London post office after the war, where colleagues never knew that the mild-mannered engineer who fixed their phones had once puppeteered 40,000 enemy soldiers with his fingertips. He'd spend lunch breaks tapping pencils on his desk, unconscious Morse patterns that his coworkers dismissed as nervous habits. They never knew he was still sending messages, muscle memory of a night when his fingers changed history. As Flowers told a military historian shortly before his death, everyone assumed electronic warfare meant complex machines and codes, all the boffins at Bletchley with their computers and calculations. Sometimes, though, all you need is to understand the rhythm of how one tired German boy taps his keys at 3 a.m. Wars aren't just fought between nations or armies. They're fought between human beings, each with their own patterns, their own habits, their own signatures. Learn those patterns well enough, and you can make the enemy dance to your rhythm without them ever knowing the music has changed.